Get down with D&D.
Yeah, you know me.
Get down with D&D.
Yeah, you know me.
Get down with D&D.
Yeah, you know me.
Who's down with D&D?
This whole party.
Get down with D&D.
Yeah, you know me.
Get down with D&D.
Yeah, you know me.
I'm down with D&D.
Yeah, you know me.
Who's down with D&D?
This whole party.
Hello, everybody. This is Shawn Merwin. I am here with the one and only Teos Abadia to do another episode of Down with D&D. Teos, what's the happenings?
Woo! I was just camping, and my understanding is there's absolutely no news. Nothing happened while I was away.
That's good. That's good. It's good to turn off all technology and or your brain.
Yep.
And do those things. I think I'm going to walk to Portland and go camping. It should only take me about a month.
Yeah. It was lovely. It was a good way to be not in our house and away from people. Mostly, there were a couple of trails you had to be careful, and I have to say, please wear a mask because none of these people were wearing masks, and I have all the compassion in the world for them, and yet really want them to wear masks.
It's true. I'm about to deliver my daughter off to college, and I will be well masked, and we'll see how that goes. We'll see if it lasts more than a week.
It's school time here for my kids too. They're about to get started, and it's like we're all remote, but it's crazy times.
Yep. But Teos, you didn't really miss much big D&D news except for all this huge D&D news. We could basically do a whole episode of just news this time, but we're going to slip in the first part of our deep dive into the Theros book, the Mythic Odysseys of Theros. But the big news this week was, while people are waiting for their Icewind Dale Rime of the Frostmaiden book, you can now also wait for another book called Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, which will bring more rules for the players of this fabulous game of D&D. Would you like to touch on some of the things that are going to be in this marvelous tome, Teos?
Yeah, this is, when they say everything, they kind of mean everything.
Yeah.
It's just packed full of stuff, and folks who love, I'm on a Discord channel with some of my buddies, and two of the guys are just heavily into optimizing. And someone wrote, are you wearing your white underwear for this? Get ready. Because it's like, what? So there are subclass options for every single D&D class, including the Artificer, which is now reprinted and will appear in this book. So it's not just in Eberron, so it's going to be kind of more widely accessible.
Mm-hmm.
So 22 new subclasses. I mean, if that's all we had, we'd be like, okay, wow, that's a lot.
Yeah.
But no. There's a lot more to this thing.
Oh, yeah.
All kinds of character options that are going to change things. We have something, and I saw a lot of bits and pieces here, but I couldn't fully grasp exactly what's going on. But we are going to see the long-awaited method of separating a race from its racial benefits. This is something that people have been asking for and people have been talking about for quite some time, both in D&D and elsewhere. And it looks like maybe it's going to be using a lineage system that's a bit like the Heroic Chronicle system that's found in Explorer's Guide to Wildmount, where you, before you start play, you have these things that establish your background and give you these various benefits, and then you begin play. And so maybe it's a modified version of that. It should be really interesting. There were a whole bunch of Twitter announcements that were kind of linked one to the other. And they would leak little bits of pieces of each of these different chapters. So one of them was like the Bard College of Creation subclass will be one of the subclasses.
Yeah. So yeah, it'll be interesting. Like you said, if it was just 22 subclasses, people would be okay. That's a lot. But if you start getting into these, new character building options, where you can pick and choose what would normally be your racial benefits. That's amazing. That's Optimizer's dream, and possibly a DM's nightmare. We're gonna wait and see, but it doesn't end there, folks. Now they are going to introduce something called patron groups, or group patrons. This is similar to what we saw in Eberron Rising from the Last War, where your whole entire group can get benefits and get background information based on working for a specific group or a specific patron.
Yeah, this is pretty neat. The ones in Eberron, make a lot of sense. They're doing things like if you're working for a particular Dragon Mark house,
Mm.
and the benefits include things like, you always have room and board at their various establishments and things like that. But I wouldn't be surprised if these have a little more teeth on the benefit side,
Mhm.
which could be pretty cool. I also can't help but think that this segues perfectly or links perfectly into the franchise system from Acquisitions Incorporated if you wanted to do that.
Yes.
I mean, group patron franchise, it's right there.
Yep. And if you want to hear more talk about franchises and using the Acquisitions Incorporated rules, Teos and I did a panel for PAX, which is coming up in the next couple of weeks, about using franchises and using the Acquisitions Incorporated way of playing D&D to spice up your campaign. When I get the exact time and date for that panel, I will share it out on the Twitters and announce it here.
Always be branding.
That's right. But
yeah,
yes.
group patrons, perfect synergy, right? Like,
yep.
Yeah.
And so above and beyond the 22 subclasses and the new character building and character creation stuff, we have new spells, new artifacts, and magical tattoos. Yes. And additional stuff.
Yeah, I mean, so some of the news that was leaked was a tree limb spellcasting focus for druids and warlocks called a Bell Branch, a sneaky spellbook for wizards that seems like a romance novel but actually carries a bunch of illusion spells, extra planar shards that each suit a different type of sorcerer, and there's renewable charges for them so you can spend your spell slots more freely while keeping some magic in reserve. I'm a little scared, Shawn.
I am. And let's talk about that after we talk about what's in this book, because I am scared too. So there's also expanded rules options for things like sidekicks, supernatural environments, natural hazards, parlaying with monsters, as well as guidance on running session zeros, which is, super important for most people who are running campaigns.
Yeah, and it probably bears saying, right? This book seems to be a very close parallel to the super successful Xanathar's Guide to Everything.
Mm-hmm.
And seems to follow that recipe of not just giving you some things for players or just for DMs, but it gives you the whole, covers everybody, something for everybody, and with lots of guidance as well. And the guidance in Xanathar's is fantastic. So I look forward to seeing what they do here.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things that me as a mostly DM, as I shake in fear about what is going to be introduced into the D&D world, at least there's some things I can look at and grow my game, as it were, using this book. And there's also puzzles. I know Elisa Teague mentioned on Twitter, the puzzle mistress of D&D, that she had a hand in creating these puzzles that you can drop into D&D adventures, complete with traps and guidance on using puzzles in your campaign.
Awesome.
Yep. And this book will release on the 17th of November, 2020. There is an alt cover, which you can get if you buy it at your friendly local gaming store. And the cover price is $49.95, which is pretty standard for a book like this.
I keep thinking that price will go up for something like this book. Because it's amazing. I mean, there's so much in there. But yeah, the alt cover looks pretty cool. I really like the alt cover with Tasha on it. And, folks may be wondering, who is Tasha? So I did a little searching and I found one piece that I didn't know. I knew a fair bit about Tasha. It's another name for Igwilv. And Igwilv is one of the most dangerous spellcasters, NPCs from the world of Greyhawk. Comes back from the old canon lore of the Greyhawk setting way back when, the origins of D&D. But what I didn't know is apparently she originated when a young girl sent Gary Gygax a letter written in crayon asking him to create a spell involving laughter. And that led to Tasha's hideous, uncontrollable laughter spell. And then kind of kept going. And he wrote a Natasha character in something related to Baba Yaga. And that led Gary Gygax to later say to people that, yes, Tasha and Igwilv are one and the same and are related to Baba Yaga. So she has this strong kind of witch presence, a very witchy kind of character. She first appeared as Igwilv in the 1982 classic adventure, The Lost Caverns of Zojkanth, one of my favorites.
Mhm.
And that one is just packed full of lore around things like summoning demons and other worlds, and just conjuration spells, all kinds of dark things like that. And that kind of began to flesh her out as someone who had allied herself with different forces, including Grazd.
Grass, the Cambion demon.
Yeah.
Yep.
And Jeremy Crawford recently, in discussing this book, was saying that they wanted to update Tasha to provide greater insight into her motivations. I think it's always worth remembering that, back in this era when these characters began, you could have a character like Warduke, and you're like, what's Warduke about? I don't know. Carries a shield. Like, whether it was a guy or a girl, they often were completely, just a paper cut character with very little to them. But I think women characters especially end up being seen through this lens where there's just very little to them. And they tend to look, in art especially, like they're someone's, arm candy. And so I think a lot of that art of Grazd, where Grazd and Igwilv together, kind of perpetuate that stereotype. And so it's nice that she is going to be front and center, and I imagine we'll get a far more rich history now that will make her a bigger presence in people's games, which is cool.
Right. And in Wizards has done a good job of keeping themes going, right? There's a book like this will come out, and then a book that's similar in theme. So I'm wondering if we will see Tasha in like a book, right? In a campaign setting, as opposed to just using her as the name here.
Yeah, I mean, because Xanathar's Guide to Everything came out before Dragon Heist, right?
Right.
Yeah, so that's I'm sure you're right.
Yep. So that gives us a little clue maybe into what's coming next.
Yeah.
So
I mean, I always have to cry a little bit, Shawn, when the world of Greyhawk gets usurped into Forgotten Realms, which just happens. You name a cool thing in Greyhawk, and it's just slowly and surely going to be put into the Forgotten Realms. And there's why would we ever cover Greyhawk when we've already taken everything out of it?
Right. The Temple of Elemental Evil. Well, this is very exciting news for D&D.
Well, so did you want to chat about the kind of our fears about this book, or do you want to go on to the next?
No, I did want to talk about this. Part of me is celebrating this new great book with all this great content from the best minds at Wizards, right? The D&D folks there. Like Dan Dillon, right? They brought Dan Dillon in, just an incredible D&D designer, so smart, so good with the rules and with the feel of the game as well as the mechanics. So there's so much to celebrate. Part of me is weeping over the rules bloat that is coming. And it's not bad. No tool is necessarily bad. It's how you use the tool. And that's kind of why I'm looking forward to talking about this Theros book, because I think we can touch on that in there, because you don't need to use every rule. And sometimes it's good to either as a DM say no to a player, or as a player to rein yourself in and not try to do everything at once, because you can run different campaigns and you can play different flavors of D&D. And that little bit of self-restraint can pay a big dividend down the road. Yeah,
it really can. So I have a couple immediate thoughts when you say that. One is to look back on 4th edition, where 4th edition began as a really well-balanced game.
Mm-hmm.
And the moment that the first book came out with magic items, that really was gone. The moment that hit the internet, I recall, just there was no way for the game to remain the same when you introduce dozens and dozens of magic items for every slot. And immediately builds just became broken. And the game really truly suffered for all that being added to it.
Yep.
It was true baggage, and the game had to recover from that.
Mhm. Yeah.
And if that one book hadn't been published, the game really would have been stronger. And I think, over the years, there have been a few stories coming out about how that was written. And Wizards has great people, but sometimes the way things happen, just as they do at all the companies where we work, things aren't perfect, and a thing gets overlooked, or something has to be accelerated to a schedule or something, and not everything can be watched over and sanded down to where it's safe. And so when you have books with lots and lots of features, there's always that danger, right? I worry about that.
Yeah.
The second thought is, and I think it's what you're kind of saying around Theros, which is that when the Forgotten Realms campaign for 4th edition was out, it allowed every option under the sun. And when we created the Dark Sun campaign, that was another option people could play, we had to think through whether people would be okay with playing with a limited set of options, because they were so used to having everything, and they thirsted for every new rule to be available to them. But we made the hard decision of saying you can only use this really small subset of rules, and we said no to some things that were really like we really did not know if it would be okay.
Right.
And the truth is, it was okay with players because we explained it up front and stated our case and promised sort of a better experience that was a focused, really feel like Dark Sun experience. You're not going to have a war forged at your table. It worked, right? It worked to funnel down and like that, and concentrate in on something.
Yeah. And as a home game DM for a home campaign, you are, more likely to say no to your player. You can look at your player in the face and say, this is why I don't want this particular rule in. And everyone's different, and some people are more different than others, but for the most part, adults can be adult and talk to each other. Where things tend to go even further off the rails, and this it's intensified this sort of rules blow and breaking of things, is for something like Adventurers League, where it's a worldwide campaign where it's harder to say no. And so I feel bad for, I'm an Adventures League administrator, but I work on the Eberron side of things. So I feel bad for the Forgotten Realms administrators who are going to have to deal with this kind of sense of entitlement that some players have, that because they are a player, they should be able to do anything that they want. And
technically you have the +1 rule.
Right.
So normally you would say I have the player's handbook +1 source, but when a book like this comes out, and it's true of Xanathar's already,
right?
Some books are not like others. Like, it's one thing to say +1 and take, I don't know, Princes of Elemental Evil player options, but when you say your +1 is Tasha's, that gives you spells, all kinds of features, feats. When it's that much, then you're getting a lot for your +1, and
right.
You have those problems.
And some of it is what is dictated to the Adventures League from Wizards, right? Wizards might say their first dictum on this whole splat book thing was, we don't expect any DM to use all these resources. We expect you as the DM to have the player's handbook +1 book. And that's why the Adventures League did what they did, because that was straight from Wizards. And since Xanathar's came out, I think Wizards has now said, well, we expect Xanathar's to kind of be a supplement to the player's handbook, so that should always be included. And if they do the same thing with this, now you are into a different stratosphere.
Yeah.
Right, it all boils down to what is fun for your group. And it's again, it's an adult responsibility to look at not just yourself, but everyone around you, to say, hey, what is the most fun for everyone, not just for you? And make some sacrifices. The sacrifice might be you as the DM needing to add something you don't want to give, but it would give some joy to players. Whereas the player, it might be having to step back and not use certain rules that will ruin the fun at the table.
Yeah, this could maybe be an entire topic that we cover sometime.
Oh yeah.
This idea of when players overwhelm the DM and that sort of tough situation where character options can make characters too powerful. How do you handle that? That's a
Yeah.
really interesting topic.
We only have about 3 months to wait before we will probably be having that discussion as the book comes out in November. But before this book comes out, there is another huge announcement, the D&D Celebration, which is happening September 18th through 20th in the online world. So this is surrounding the release of Icewind Dale, Rime of the Frost Maiden. So this is a celebration of that release where you can come and play online in the world of Icewind Dale. You can watch play sessions with D&D luminaries. There will be panels led by the D&D design team and community. It's going to be a big thing. I think it's sort of like the D&D Live play was a couple months ago, but bigger.
Yeah, and I always think, right, like you want to know, like, so was D&D Live successful? And the answer to that question is always, well, do they do the same thing again?
Yes.
So they did D&D Live to announce this book, and now we're seeing D&D Celebration when it comes out. Clearly, that was successful, and we're gonna see more of this.
Yep. So several thousands, tens, hundreds of thousands of dollars were raised in charity for D&D Live, and the same thing is happening here. All of the Wizards of the Coast portion of any funds raised, if you sign up to play games, are going to Extra Life.
Extra Life.
Yep.
Yeah.
So you can go right now. Oh, go ahead, Teos.
I was just going to say that also they're going to be previewing Tasha's content during this time, which is, so we'll see more and more about that book.
Yep. So if you want more information, you can just go to the Wizards website, right? wizards.com/D&D, and it's the first thing on the page. So you can click on it, learn everything about it. If you want to play, I want to throw out a few things just to be aware of. Specifically, this is a 3-day event. On Wednesday, you can play a preview adventure called Ice Road Trackers. This is the same adventure that ran at D&D Live and at Gen Con. So if you've already played it there, just be aware that it's Friday, it's that same thing. On Saturday, there is going to be an epic adventure run 3 separate times. This is a 3-hour event where all the tables that are playing in that particular time slot will be playing the same adventure at the same time. This is going to be a pretty large undertaking. Teos and I are involved in the running of it and all of these things. And I was involved in the writing of it along with Celeste Konowich. Hi, Celeste. Good job.
Celeste.
So hopefully it will go over swimmingly. And then on Sunday, it is the first running of the next Adventures League adventure of the season. And that is called The Frozen North. And I believe that was written by Paige Lightman. Hi, Paige.
Hey, Paige.
So one thing you need to know, though, is that the adventures running on Friday and on Sunday are for only 1st and 2nd level characters. So, and the epic is for 1st through 4th level characters. So if you do play on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, you'll have to decline a level at some point if you want to play that same character in the Sunday events. And if you are an Adventures League veteran, you know what we mean by that. If you're not, we can explain it real quick. After an adventure, you can always decline to take a level. That gives you more time to play the character at the levels you enjoy the most. So if that is the case, that you want to play all 3 of these events,
with the
same character, then you need to do that. Whew. So we got through that.
Yeah. So hit level 2 if you want to play it all with the same character.
Yeah.
Hit level 2. Stay at level 2.
Yep.
And at the very end of it, you can then level to 3.
Yep.
And you'll have enjoyed it greatly.
And we are anticipating a release of the Season 10 Adventures League rules around the same time of D&D Celebration. So hang in there, wait for more details on that. And if you are not an Adventurers League player, but you are interested in playing at these things, that's okay. You can go sign up at the D&D Celebration event portal, and just sit down and have a game and see how it goes.
Yeah, grab a pre-gen. There are pre-gens on the D&D website that are Adventures League compatible. You can just grab a pre-gen
Yep.
And play, and then you really honestly don't need to know any of the Adventures League rules. If all you did was bring one of those pre-gens that work,
Yep.
and you played, and you didn't go beyond second level,
Yep.
that's all you need to know, and you'll have a great time. You'll get a taste for what the Icewind Dale plot line is going to be like,
Mhm.
see some neat stuff, have some wonderful DMs run games for you. It's great.
And speaking of that, Teos will be running games all weekend.
In addition to the good DMs, I'll be there.
And Teos will be there as well. Whew. Now, that normally that's big news, right? That's enough. But huge news is they are hiring a VP of D&D, a vice president of Dungeons and Dragons at Wizards of the Coast. A job posting went up a couple weeks ago, and I told Teos that if he didn't apply, I would never speak to him again. But I came to my senses and realized I needed someone to podcast with me, so I have gone back on that promise. But interesting times. If you are an executive type and good at juggling the proverbial cats or weasels or whatever it is that juggles that bites the least, you could apply for that.
Yeah, I mean, what a job, right? Like,
Yeah.
Man, I mean, I would love to do this job, and I think for someone who's used to this sort of like wrangling corporate departments, which is, it's always a really hard job to do this kind of work, which is the main reason I would say no to it right now. But man, someday I would love to do a job like this. What a dream, right?
Yeah.
You'd have to take that fan portion of your brain and put it mostly on ice, but to have that responsibility and be able to work to try to help these amazing teams, right, do great work. Oh, that would be incredible.
Yep.
So whoever ends up there, I mean, wow, that's going to be a dream job.
Congratulations and good luck.
You didn't need sleep, did you?
Right. And on a sadder note, Kate Welsh is no longer working at Wizards of the Coast. They had announced that she is moving on to other opportunities. And I remember being very excited when she was hired because we knew about her from seeing her on the C team, and she was very dynamic and super fun and really charismatic. And I was excited when she was hired to bring hopefully a new perspective to specifically, the D&D team.
And I think, and she did that, right?
Right.
Like, the products that she was a part of, you can feel her touch on those, her creative angle on them, and sort of the inspirational push that she brought to the various products, from Salt Marsh to, touching on the AI angle, and just fantastic. And I was fortunate, as I'm sure you did, to run into her at a number of events, and just, she's fantastic. So we were very lucky to have her at Wizards. I'm sorry that she's moving on, but she has shaped the game, so it's great.
Yeah, I took my family to the PAX South in San Antonio, and we were sitting at the actual live show, and Kate was in the audience. She was right a row in front of us, and she was yelling just as loudly as anyone else in the audience at the stage and laughing and really getting into it. And my daughter looked at me and said, "Wow, she should be up on stage." And I'm like, honey, just wait a couple hours and she will be. So, just my daughter, who didn't know who she was, right, could just, after 20 minutes of seeing her, realize how charismatic and lively and into the game, into storytelling that she was. So, good luck.
I expect and hope that she will continue to be, because she likes D&D so much and likes this kind of, the space so much. I hope she'll continue to be present in the space and help improve the space.
Yep. Hope so. Now, on to lesser big news, but still news. The Unearthed Arcana survey is up. We had talked about the College of Spirits Bard last time, And I don't have time this week to talk about the Undead Patron for Warlocks. Maybe we'll shuffle that off to next time. But for anyone out there who wants to take the survey, make sure you get to the website. There is a link from the front page to the survey, and you can take it. And do you want to talk quickly about Jasper's Game Day?
Yeah, so Jasper's Game Day is a group run by Fenway Jones with help from others. It tackles suicide awareness and prevention. She has been doing this for several years now at major conventions, and they tend to have a big yearly event that they do, and this time it's going to be all online. So August 26th to August 30th, there are games being run by all kinds of incredible DMs. Just the 26th, which is the day we're recording this, we have Sharif Jackson, Greg Tito, Kate Welch, and Dan Dillon. Other DMs include James Intricasso, heard of him, Dr. Megan Connell, Omega Jones, TJ Storm, James Hake, B. Dave Walters, Satine Phoenix, and more. I mean, just, yeah. So amazing games, and you can get seats at these wherever there's still space, and watch them and participate. The easiest way to get all of the information is to follow the Twitter, go to Twitter and look up the account Jasper's Game Day. And that will have all of the schedule of the games, and you can follow the link to see them.
Yep. The last
I'm playing
time,
in one of them.
Yeah, you're playing today, right?
Today, in Sharif's game. So I'll be bringing my half-orc Grom 2 Eyes. That'll be a lot of fun.
Nice. Yeah, I've run games for Jasper's Game Day in the past, and it's a heck of a lot of fun. So,
great group.
You can get in, play, watch, and donate if possible for a really good cause, and Fenway does a great job as an ambassador for it. So
it really does.
Yep. Now that we've got through a lot of news, we are going to talk about the Mythic Odysseys of Theros. What we're going to do is kind of do a review of the book, but we're looking at it through a specific lens. We're looking at it through the lens of, if I'm running a D&D campaign, what do I love about this book, and how am I going to use this book for a campaign? So I wanted to just talk for a second. We've talked about this book before, so you know that it's sort of got this classical Western mythology angle, Greek mythology, Roman mythology. And as a student of mythology over the years, I love the stories that are told by this. A lot of us have only gotten our Greek mythology education through D&D, right? We flip through the old deities and demigods book, and we think, oh, okay, I know everything there is to know about Greek mythology because I know the stat block for I
know Athena's armor class.
right. I know what her shield is called. Good job. But there is a deeper there's deeper stories told through this mythology. The Greek mythology tells of these ultra-powerful creatures like the Titans that are very unlike humans, but those creatures are then overthrown by lesser powerful creatures that are still powerful, like the gods. So the gods overthrow the Titans. So the powers that be in the world become a little more and more like humans. And then you get demigods, who are sort of mortal, sort of immortal, but they too can sort of test the gods when they have to. So there's sort of this hierarchy of power where mortals, like humans, are sort of at the bottom, but they're ever striving up toward this sort of ultra powerful being, and they can strive to become more godlike, while the gods are a little bit more mortal than gods in other cultures might be. So you'll get the gods coming down to earth. And
Can I just say that aspect of quality of the fault is what has always attracted me to this type of thinking, this type of pantheon, right? Where you have a world where the gods have all of the human foibles and fall prey to them, are unable to be perfect enough to not do them. So whether it's envy or lust or whatever, they will fall to these tendencies like a person would. And these things they do will then, these failings will involve mortals and create this sort of relationship back and forth. And then champions will test them because of these foibles, right? And that's right. A great interplay.
Yeah. And there is a conceit within this book that the gods are only there because mortals worship them. Right. So while the gods are powerful, they get their power through mortal worship. So there's this balance of power, and it can always shift in one direction or the other, depending on the god involved, as Teos talked about their faults, their flaws, and what the heroes bring to this whole tangled mess of fate.
Yeah.
So is there anything that you want to talk about as just an overview of this before we get into the chapter?
When I read all of this book, so one thing on the chapter, the introduction, is that it touches on dreams, and it also puts in this concept of Theros being a land where things believed and dreamed here eventually become real. And the idea that it's the collective belief by people over time that creates things. So monsters, gods, the very laws are all things that come from a common acceptance. I think that's really cool.
Yeah. And it shows that you as a player have the ability to change those things.
Yeah.
Instead of them being immutable.
And that's it could be like you can just immediately start thinking of campaign concepts that would be really neat based on that, right? Just the larger, the big thing I took away from reading this book is that this reminded me that, wow, divinity used to matter a lot more in D&D than it does now. And over the editions, we've sort of separated ourselves from what the game used to be, where religion and the gods had a huge impact in play. Whether you're a player or a DM, you felt this and saw this presence of the gods. So I think of Living Greyhawk as an organized play campaign in 3rd edition. Where you were from, which region you were from, lent itself to a religious leaning that your characters had. So if you were from the Duchy of Jeff, you followed one of the old faith gods almost always, and you were steeped in the lore of the old faith gods, Beori and Obad High and all this. If you're from Valuna, it's all about Ra.
Right.
And if you were one of those annoying players from the Theocracy of the Pale, you were talking about Foltus and his blinding light nonstop, right? Gods opposed each other. So like if you were in a particular region and you saw bugbears that were wearing shields with a certain, painting on it, you had a reaction as a player, right? As a character.
Yeah.
It drove the choices you made. It drove how people wrote adventures. It drove the plot lines in regions. And it's not just organized play and Living Greyhawk, but if you think of Forgotten Realms, the time of troubles.
Exactly.
Gods were turned into mortals and avatars, and they had to walk the realms. The FR novels, Forgotten Realms novels, they're full of these mentions of the machinations of deities, the links between heroes and deities, all influenced by this sort of Greek-Roman mythology. But, or even a classic adventure like Temple of Elemental Evil, where you have Saint Cuthbert versus Ayuz and Zugmoy.
Right. There's, several pages of box text almost where the players sit back and watch Ayuz interact with Saint Cuthbert. And if you ask a lot of players who were beginning during 1st edition, what's your favorite hardcover book? A lot of them are going to say Deities and Demigods, right? Yeah. Because there were stat blocks for the gods, and as soon as you give something a stat block, players want to try to kill it. And I can't count the number of campaigns I either ran or heard about or heard people talk about where the main goal of the campaign was the players wanted to become gods, that their characters wanted to become gods. That was it. That was the main thing. And you haven't seen that as much in 4th edition. I didn't see it a lot, and same for 5th edition. Part of it's because there are fewer higher level adventures, but that sort of thing isn't as prevalent. And that's like you, the first thing I saw when I read this book in my mind was, oh yeah, we're getting the gods involved now. That's going to change the way these campaigns run.
Yeah, it really does.
So go ahead.
Yeah, no.
I was going to say, let's do a quick rundown of the chapters of this book, and we'll see how far we can get. So chapter 1 covers the heroes, races, class options, and backgrounds to make the character. It introduces supernatural gifts that these characters will get as they start. So it's a feature set that Theros' adventurers, setting them apart as heroes as opposed to normal mortals. Chapter 2 introduces the gods and talks about a new sort of currency called piety that characters can earn to as they please the gods that they worship. Chapter 3 looks at the mortal world, the lands in which these adventures unfold. It covers 3 particular city-states, and then the lands that the darkness around those 3 points of light, if you will. It also talks about the divine realm of Nyx and the underworld. Chapter 4 builds on the guidelines from the Dungeon Master's Guide and highlights adventures set in Theros, focusing on the gods presenting omens that will lead the adventurers through the plot of a campaign. Chapter 5 details the treasures of Theros, so it looks at artifacts of the gods, magical inventions, and other devices infused with the magic of the world. And Chapter 6 gives us our monsters. So, it talks about Greek-inspired or Greek mythology-inspired monsters and gives them a unique place within this Theros setting. Did you want to mention anything about that?
I mean,
overview?
the only thing I'll say is that alt cover book, which I have, is just one of the best. If it's not the best alt cover that we've had, the art is just incredible.
Yeah. Okay. So the cover I know is the warrior fighting the warrior. Okay. No, I don't have the alt cover. That is a really cool alt cover.
Yeah.
I love the regular cover.
Yes.
It was evocative, and there are subtle details in that. It's not your typical fantasy cover, in that the details were amazing. In the shadows of the Hydra, it shows the starry night to bring to mind this idea that the gods are the stars.
Yeah, and they're watching your actions, and your actions are important to them, right?
Yep. Yeah. So just a really great cover. But let's delve into chapter 1. So this involves the character creation. The first thing the book does is talk about heroic drives. So what they want you to do for a Theros campaign is take those bonds, ideals, flaws, personality traits, and crank those bad boys up to 11, right? They want you to make these, they're not just flaws, right? They're the Greek tragic flaws, right? You're Oedipus. You're not just, Bob the fighter. You've got these flaws that are so big that they will probably lead to your downfall in some way. They aren't just bonds, right? You're not just friends with the rogue who fed you when you were a child, right? These are the gods themselves are your bonds.
Yeah, and they do a nice job of taking typical bonds or ideals or any of those that exist in the player's handbook and adding one word or two, usually a god,
right,
to throw in the no, wait, this is bigger than that, right? It's not just like, oh, I'm a little bit lazy, but it's for this reason, and it's to a greater extent.
Mm-hmm. Next, they talk about supernatural gifts that are abilities given to characters from gods or creatures of legend. So these are feat-like abilities that also come with a characteristic. An example would be Nyxborn. So you were born of the night, or born from the minds of the gods. So you get a cloak of stars once per long rest. Attack rolls have a disadvantage against you for 1 minute, and you have resistance to necrotic and radiant damage. That's pretty beefy right there.
Yeah, yeah, that's one of the stronger ones, but they tend to be pretty strong like that. And they aren't all what I would say balanced with each other.
Yeah.
But they're all really cool.
Yep.
Anvil Rot, right? You've been actually created by the gods.
Yeah.
You can have a heroic destiny. you can be against sort of the gods. You're an iconoclast. Lifelong companion, where you're sort of, create this bond with other people. Nyxborn, an oracle, pious, unscarred. I mean, they're pretty big. I mean, it's kind of like be a demigod, right?
Yep. And they also suggest, instead of one of these, you can just give a feat to a character at first level.
And they even say that you could, with DM permission in a normal campaign, have one of these be a feat.
True. Yep. So what we're seeing then is an upfront loading of power into these characters, and not just loading in terms of mechanical power, but narrative power. Right? You are larger than life.
Yep.
This is not, you're a farmer who just happens to kill a carrion crawler one day and then decide to go adventuring. This is you are destined to do this. And with that front loading of power, there has to be, I think, a give back at some point. And for me, that give back is the races. Not because the races aren't cool, but because the campaign limits what race you can be. And I love the races as presented. So instead of just saying you can play any wild race that you want, the races in here are human, Leonin, Minotaur, Satyr, Triton. What did I miss? Centaur. Yep. And I love campaigns that do that. I love campaigns that say, here is what belongs here, and this is the reason why. So work with this.
Yeah. Which I think is really cool. Though they are pretty strong races. They are, these are not soft. Like the Leonin is +2 con, +1 strength. You can attack with your claws for a little damage. You move at 35 feet, so a little extra speed. Yep. Dark vision. You get a skill choice, and you have this roar that can still your enemies with fear. Not bad.
Yeah, they are possibly a little more powerful than a normal race, but it also cuts down on that ability to pick and choose, and optimize based on those choices.
Yeah.
So that's what I like. As I thought about it more, if I were running this campaign, I would just say everyone's human. All player characters are human, but go ahead and choose whatever race you want for the mechanics of it. Since you are born of the gods, since you are touched in a way that's different than any other mortal, why not have wings, right? Why not be an Aarakocra and you just happen to be a human who was touched by a certain god, and so you can fly?
That's a great idea.
Yeah. And that story, mechanically it lets players play around, but story-wise, you are in the Greek world as we know it.
So I wonder if the rules in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything are going to allow us to sort of do that for a campaign like this. Like, could you say everybody's human, but sort of get your racial benefit through this other mechanic that Tasha has?
Yep, that's what I was wondering too. So we will know maybe in a few weeks or at least a few months.
November.
Yep.
Yeah, worst case. Just to quickly say, Minotaur has the horns, and so you can do this kind of charging gore, or you can shove people around after you attack. Uses your bonus action, but it's pretty fun. Satyr has some of my favorite art ever. It's from a Magic the Gathering card.
Yeah.
But where this satyr is just super happy with a glass of wine in her hand while sort of choking another satyr next to her by mistake.
Yeah.
Just wonderful. But they can do like a mirthful leap, which adds D8 feet to your leap. Advantage on saves versus magical effects. You get persuasion and performance, which is pretty sweet. Charisma dex. Triton gets an interesting +1 to strength, con, and charisma. And they have a really neat feature in this control air and water, where they get the benefit and it grows over time, adding to its power, which I thought is kind of unusual. So you get fog cloud, but at 3rd level you can cast Gust of Wind with it, and at 5th level Wall of Water, which is kind of cool.
Yeah. So it's almost a Genasi feel in that sense.
Yeah.
Where you have this
and strong theme.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They have 2 new subclasses. One is the Bards School of Eloquence, and the other's the Paladin's Oath of Glory. I almost feel like there could have been more. I wanted like the wrestling fighter. I wanted the seafaring ranger. You know, that there. I think there was a little bit of a missed opportunity, but yeah, make your own, right?
You wonder whether they just, didn't hit some page count thing, or maybe there are some of these outlined. They're like, no, just no space.
Yeah, but subclasses other than classes, subclasses are one of the harder things to design and play test well. So I can understand why there would be fewer.
I took note of the Paladin here with the Oath of Glory. It feels to me a lot like a 4th edition Warlord.
Okay.
So it has like Inspiring Smite. You deal damage, you use your Divine Smite, and you grant temporary hit points to allies within 30 feet. There's one where you can increase the speed that everybody moves, which is right out of the 4A Warlord power list. You can turn someone getting hit into a miss. Like it just felt a lot like that, and super fun.
Mm-hmm.
I still want a Warlord for 5th edition, but this is a nice kind of, it can hold you over if you're a fan of that.
Are you just lazy and just want other people to attack for you? Is that how it works?
That too. Yeah.
Okay.
Or where you're always buffing people, right? This is more like there was always the lazy Warlord, and there was also the like constant tactically advancing you thing, like everybody take a move, right? Or everybody you have temps, everybody you can, and this is that kind of build, right? Where it's the tactician kind.
There is a new background called Athlete. It's obviously got Olympic connections. I don't know if I can say the word Olympic without being sued by the Olympics, because they're pretty litigious, but there are obviously connections to the Olympics with all sorts of powers that are your special ability for this background is people know you because you're a famous athlete, so you can sort of get free room and board if people have seen you perform, and all of the traits and flaws and stuff have to do with being an athlete. It's pretty funny. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I love the write-up. When visiting any settlement within 100 miles of where you grew up, there's a 50% chance you can find someone there who admires you.
Right. And the other 50%, they were rooting for the other person.
That could be.
Yeah. So, right. So if you roll 51 or higher, they're wearing the other team's jersey and they don't like you all that much.
Perfect.
And so in general, just reading this first section made me want to run a Theros campaign very much. Yeah. And if you can get me to want to run a campaign of your book, you've done a good job in your first chapter, because I think I'm pretty discerning, and I really like this. But
agreed.
But this is what I would do. I would make it a really short campaign, but epic right from the start. It's going to be fast leveling, right? It's going to be 1 4-hour session for first level, 1 4-hour session for second. We're going to keep the action moving. There aren't going to be any battles less than deadly. We're not going to have a lot of drama, right? This is Hercules going through his tasks as he gets stronger, and then you're going to be fighting the gods themselves when you get up to 20th level, because that's why they're there, right? Because we're going to rail against them.
I love that. Yeah, absolutely. Like Jason and the Argonauts, for the glory, for the cause, for these various gods, and go.
Yeah. So that's what I want to run when I read that first chapter. And
I mean, and I'll just say again that I think that also what I got from this first chapter was just that, like I said before, remembering how deities can really shine in games, and it doesn't just have to be a Theros campaign, but you can take this idea and go like, wow, I can reinforce how deities are in my current campaign, right, or whatever game I'm playing.
Yep, they can. I mean, every world pretty much, except Dark Sun, kind of, have the gods there. It's just a matter of what dial you want to turn to, if you're going to have more or less of an impact on the day-to-day lives of regular people and the day-to-day lives of adventurers. So I think we're at a point where we should stop, because we had a lot of news and we really went into good detail on that first chapter. So next time we will do part 2 of our look at this wonderful book and talk more about it and how we would use it if we were running a campaign there.
Sounds great.
All
yeah,
right.
Chapter 2 is a pretty neat chapter, so I look forward to that.
That's right. So thank you so much, everyone out there, for listening. We appreciate your support. If you are a patron, extra thumbs up for you. Thank you for giving us a few of your drachma. To see, that was a Greek reference.
That was well done, sir.
Thank you. I don't know where that information was stored in my brain, but it just popped out. Of course, something really important like picking up the dry cleaning is gone now, but that's the way it goes.
Worth it.
So thank you for listening. Thank you for your support. If you would like to become a patron, you can find us on patreon.com/MMP. And again, if you can't support us that way, we certainly understand. And you can help us out by just talking about us on social media, on Twitter, on Facebook, Instagram, anywhere where you talk to your social friends or your antisocial friends even. We'll take them too. By pointing them in our direction. Teo, speaking of the internet, where can people follow your work?
You can find me on Twitter at AlphaStream, my blog at alphastream.org, and hopefully you can look up Jasper's Game Day and find the game that I played with Sharif and other awesome players.
There you go. And you can find me on Twitter at Sean Merwin. You can talk to us, Teos and I, on the forums at forums.misdirectedmark.com. You can also follow Down with D&D itself on Twitter at Down with DND. Down with D&D is a Misdirected Mark production, the media arm of Encoded Designs. So, Mr. Abadia, what are we going to do now?
Go kill some monsters in the name of our God, of course.
Of course.
Get down with D&D.
Yeah, you know me.
Get down with D&D.
Yeah, you know me.
Get down with D&D.
Yeah, you know me.
Who's down with D&D?
This whole party.
You down with D&D?
Yeah, you know me.
You down with D&D?
Yeah, you know me.
I'm down with D&D.
Yeah, you know me.
Who's down with D&D?